And welcome back to Chicago Bulls Insider. Today, we are talking about if it is way too early to have trade candidates for the Chicago Bulls. And so, before we go ahead and we jump into it, I first want to remind you to slam dunk on that subscribe button, just like Modest Vazelis slam dunks in games. And so, in exchange for slamming on that subscribe button, I'm going to give you nothing but daily content around the Chicago Bulls. So, make sure that you hit that like, you hit that subscribe, and you join the Chicago Bulls Insider family as we talk nothing but Chicago Bulls basketball. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump into it. And so we are talking about the trade buzz around the Chicago Bulls and if it is way too early to start thinking about trade candidates. And so got a chance to see this article on Clutch Points. And so if you've not got a chance to see this, it's way too early Chicago Bulls trade candidates in 2025, 2026. And so within this article, they're talking about Nikola Vucevic and Patrick Williams. And so I wanted to extend off of this. And let's start with this and starting, is it too early to even think about this? And so I think that number one, if you're a basketball team and you're trying to get better, I think that it's not too early to start thinking about trades. I think that what this shows is that you're forward thinking. You're thinking about, okay, possibly we're going to need to correct some things here, and here. And so this is something that I think that we would welcome as Chicago Bulls fans. We would like to see a front office that is forward thinking like this. But as far as going out there and saying, okay, it's time to execute a trade now, I would say that it is a bit too early to execute a trade. I think that there's two things that are happening here. And so not too early to think about possible players that you want to trade down the line and start to maybe line that up for what you want to do to replace them or get some assets back. Like, it's not too early for that, but it is too early to maybe pick up the phones and start trying to get players moved right now, because I think that as the season goes along, you really have a chance for the value of players to go up. And so take, for instance, with Nikola Vucevic. And so, if this were last season, like we're going into last year, much of the talk was about him and Zach LaVine going ahead and just recouping their trade value. And I think that both of those players did so. You saw that Zach LaVine was ultimately moved. And I think that the way that Vooch played last season, he surely could have been moved, last season. But this season, I think that for him and a lot of these players, if the Bulls start off the way that they finished the season, I think most certainly there's a chance that if the Bulls want to explore trades for these guys, the trades are going to be there, and the value perhaps may be more than what you could have gotten a season ago. Because with Vooch last season finishing with the 18.5 points per game, and then also to the 10.1 rebounds a game, that was his 11th straight double-double season. And also, too, he shot a career high 53% from the field, and he shot a very nice percentage from downtown at 40.2%. So just looking at Vooch alone, this is a guy that I definitely think a contender is certainly going to want to get Vooch. I think the question here with the Chicago Bulls really on all their trades is just you don't want to see them overvalue Vooch. And I think that, look, if it means that you're going to get a player maybe that fits your timeline, great. But I think that the Bulls, if they're really going to turn some things around, they're going to have to get some draft assets. And that means even if it's not a first round pick, there is still value in a second round pick. And so that's right where I'm at with Vooch. I think that the ship has sailed for a first round pick back for Vooch, but I do think you should at least get, some second round draft picks for Vooch, especially if he continues on the tear that he had last season, which I actually do think that there is a chance that he does come into this season and he does play extremely well. Now with Patrick Williams, look, we can say that we would like to see him traded, but honestly speaking, man, I think that he's a guy that you may put him on, the list here to be traded, but I'm not sure that that necessarily is going to happen, especially now that the Bulls have gone out and they've added more forwards, because I do expect for Modest Buzelis to continue to keep going further and just kind of running away from Patrick Williams with that position. Next, when you look at the fact that they got Isaac Okoro and just him over here, I think that this is a guy that most certainly is probably going to pass Patrick Williams with what he can do defensively. And there's a real chance that he can go even further if he can put it together offensively, which I think he's going to have a chance here. And then you look at a guy like Julian Phillips. And so between Dalen Terry and Julian Phillips, I think that he's a guy that has taken a bit of a step forward, between those two players. And I think at times you could see that they would go with Julian Phillips before they would go with Patrick Williams, or Julian Phillips before they would go with Patrick Williams. And so this is why I think for him, and just the way that his value is trending, it might be a situation where the Chicago Bulls might have to eat this contract. And if they do have to, with the way the salary cap is going up and things like that, I don't think that this is something that is going to hinder the Bulls, because they're already factoring in him being on the roster next season, and they're going to have, cap space. Granted that they go ahead and take care of business with these expiring contracts. And so, the next thing too, just looking at some of these other players and just really why, waiting is probably the best bet, because looking at Coby White, coming into this season with him, look, if he continues to show what he did last season and really expands off of what he did, you can definitely imagine just how the trade market is going to look for Coby White, because I think that there is going to be a ton of people that are calling because if he does take another step forward this season, I also think that what happens with Coby White is that not only do you see him get like a constant role finally with this team, but you would also, I think, see him expand his game. And so whatever that looks like, whether he's just being a guy that becomes maybe better in the mid-range, maybe he's a guy that becomes maybe better off of a catch and shoot situations and stuff like that. I do think that if that type of leap comes with Coby White, it's most certainly going to come with something expanding in his game. And also too, not to limit him defensively. Maybe he figures it out even more with his off-ball defense or something like that. But I think that there's something in Coby White's game that would expand, that would certainly take his value up. And it's not just going to be just merely just scoring the basketball and putting up a whole bunch of points and things like that. And then also too with Ayo, I think that with Ayo, definitely with him, the value increases. Number one, as you see him that he's healthy again, which he has been healthy with the Chicago Bulls. Last season was the most missed games that he's had with the Chicago Bulls. But I think that with him, you're going to see just how good of an impact player he is, and the fact that he can be just very versatile with his role. And what I love about Ayo is this is a guy that he doesn't need a play drawn up for him, and he can impact the basketball game. I love the fact that he can be a one-man fast break and can score, tons of points that way. He's terrific with understanding what he needs to do from a basketball IQ on the offense and the defensive end here. And he really is a guy that can be very switchable in that defensive role, which really, that is why I think his value goes up this season, because the Bulls really need to feature him a little bit more, because defensively, this is something certainly the Bulls are going to need. And then when you look at a guy like Kevin Huerter, who is also on an expiring contract here, this is a guy that I think a lot of people are sleeping on, because he is definitely turned his game around from when he was with the Sacramento Kings. And I think he looks a lot more like the player that we remember from the Atlanta Hawks when they went to the Eastern Conference Finals there, because he looks very comfortable working off the ball. And I think defensively, look, he's not the greatest like on-ball defender, but man, he's a terrific, I think, kind of team defender. Like, he's a guy that fits the concepts and stuff like that. He understands where to be and things like that. And it's not like you just attack him on the defensive end. Like, he definitely has something there, but I'm liking what I'm seeing from him from an offensive standpoint. And I definitely think that with the way that he stretches the floor, he's going to show some more of that with the Chicago Bulls. He's really going to have a chance to really be featured in this offense when he's out there, because the Bulls like to let it fly. And so you can imagine that his value is going to go up. And then with Zac Collins, it depends on what Billy Donovan is going to do here. But if Zac Collins can be more like what he was when he started, I believe for the 8 games or so, and just really shows you the versatility as far as passing the basketball, and then also too being able to be physical on the defensive end and finishing contact and things like that. Certainly, I think a team is going to want that size to come off the bench. And I think for him, if he increases his value, I think he's going to knock down the three-point shot a lot better than what he did, because coming out of college, that was one of the things that he did. And so he definitely struggled, I think, with that last season, but it's all going to depend on just the opportunity that he gets. But make no mistake about it, I think that the Bulls are in the driver's seat to really turning this roster around. But the key is going to be AK in this front office being smart about these moves, because I do think that the value is going to increase with these players. I want it to increase for Patrick Williams. I'm not going to be, holding just holding on to the hope that that's going to happen here with Patrick Williams. Couldn't get that out, but I just think that for everybody else that we talked about, I do feel like that there is a chance that the trade value can go up. And so going back to the original question, I don't think it's too early to have candidates that you would like to trade, and with the understanding that you know how you want to shape your roster. But I do think it is probably a bit quick to go out there and start picking up the phone to try to initiate a trade right now, because teams really have to figure out what they're going to look like coming out of preseason. You still have to factor in that there's going to be injuries and things like that. And just as time goes along, as the season really unfolds and just kind of takes on a story of its own, which it always does, then that's where you're going to have more teams start to call and stuff like that. And I don't think that the Bulls are in a position where they have to go out there and they have to feature players. Like at this point in time with Vooch, he's shown you with what he did last year that he can play in a faster system and still be good to go and not be the guy that you have to necessarily feature out there, which is why I think for Vooch and his trade value, it is set to increase. Now, with these other guys, with Coby White and stuff like that, like Coby's figured out a way to figure or to get things going with different roles. And so I do think that he's going to take a step forward. But all of the rest of these guys here, they're in a prime position to definitely increase trade value. And so you guys let me know in the comments what you guys are thinking. Is it too early for the Bulls to consider trades? Should they be picking up the phone right now and trying to trade these guys? And if they are, who do you think should be the first person that the Bulls should look to move on from? And so anyway, you guys let me know in the comments. And as we always say, go Bulls. And I will see you guys on the next one. Peace.